Ever get that feeling you're lost in a sea of supplements? Like they all promise miracles, but you're
Mhm.
not even sure what you're really taking.
Right.
Well, today we're ditching the marketing hype and getting down to the nitty-gritty science behind vitamins.
Absolutely.
Specifically, we're going to explore what happens when we have too much or too little of these essential nutrients.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
We often take vitamins for granted,
Mm-hmm.
but they're like these tiny little building blocks, essential for keeping our bodies running smoothly.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
you provided a ton of research for this deep dive
I did.
focused on vitamin deficiencies.
Right.
And from what I can tell, it looks like those deficiencies can really mess things up.
Or absolutely. The symptoms are all over the map, almost like a medical puzzle,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, so let's see if we can untangle this web together.
Right.
Our research dives into a whole bunch of different deficiencies, each affecting
Yeah.
different parts of the body. So we're basically taking a tour of the human body, but through the lens of vitamins.
I love that.
Let's start with vision and vitamin A. Everyone's heard about carrots being good for your eyes.
Right.
So that connection makes sense.
Right. Exactly. It all comes down to vitamin A and how crucial it is for your retina, those cells that capture light and allow you to see.
Okay, that makes sense. But what happens when someone's deficient in vitamin A? I mean, I'm guessing it's more than just needing glasses.
Oh, for sure. It can start with something called night blindness,
Hmm.
having trouble seeing in low light. But it can progress to some pretty serious stuff if it's not addressed.
It's like what? The research mentioned something called Bitot spots?
Ah, yes. Batot spots.
Yeah.
Those are like these little foamy patches that show up in the whites of your eyes,
Really?
often near the cornea. And they're like a dead giveaway for a vitamin A deficiency.
Mm.
And if it's not treated,
Yeah.
it can even lead to corneal degeneration,
Oh, wow.
which can permanently damage your vision.
That's a lot more serious than I realized.
Right.
It really puts into perspective just how vital vitamin A is.
Absolutely. And it highlights how something as tiny as a vitamin deficiency can snowball into a major health issue.
Totally. Okay, so moving on from vision, our research also delves into the nervous system, which brings us to vitamin B1 or thiamine. And this one honestly sounds a bit scary.
Yeah, thiamine deficiency can be pretty serious. It can lead to something called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome.
Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome.
Yeah, it affects the brain and the nervous system, and not in a good way.
What kind of things should we be looking out for? I know memory problems are one.
Right, so early on you might see confusion, difficulty with balance and coordination, even paralysis of the eye muscles, which can cause double vision.
Wow.
And if it progresses to Korsakoff syndrome, the memory loss becomes much more severe and often irreversible.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly serious. It makes you wonder, how common are these deficiencies?
It really varies depending on diet, location, but it's
Wow.
definitely something to be aware of. And, speaking of B vitamins, we should probably touch on niacin or vitamin B3.
Oh, right. Niacin deficiency. The research mentioned that can lead to something called pellagra, which honestly sounded pretty rough.
Yeah, pellagra is no joke. It's often remembered by the 4Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and if it's not treated, death.
4Ds. Those are some serious consequences.
Yeah.
It's interesting how varied these deficiency symptoms can be. I mean, we've gone from vision problems to neurological issues to, well, things we probably don't want to discuss over breakfast.
It just goes to show you these vitamins are deeply intertwined with our health,
Yeah.
and it really makes you appreciate how interconnected our bodies are. Something as seemingly simple as a vitamin deficiency can spiral in so many different directions.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about a vitamin a lot of people associate with just one thing. Vitamin C and scurvy. I'll admit, I always kind of thought scurvy was a thing of the past, like something pirates worried about.
Well, you're not entirely wrong. Scurvy was definitely more common back in the day, especially among sailors who didn't have access to fresh fruits and veggies.
Right, but it still exists today, right?
Yeah, it does. Although it's much less common now. And it's more than just swollen gums and slow wound healing.
Oh, really? What else?
You can have easy bruising, little pinprick dots under your skin, from bleeding, fatigue, joint pain, even
Get out.
corkscrew-shaped hair.
Corkscrew-shaped hair? I had no idea. There's so much more to vitamin C than I thought.
Exactly. It just goes to show that even deficiencies we think of as, historical can still pop up. And the effects can be pretty surprising.
Okay, I am adding vitamin C-rich foods to my grocery list right now as we speak.
Good idea.
Okay, what's next on our vitamin journey?
Let's talk about our bones and vitamin D. I mean, you probably already know it's crucial for bone health.
Right, and that we get it from sunlight.
Exactly. And living in certain climates or not getting enough sun exposure, that can really mess with your vitamin D levels.
That's true.
It's actually more common than you might think, especially during the winter months.
Right.
And it's not just about soaking up the sun either.
Mm.
If you don't get enough vitamin D, it can actually lead to problems with your bone development,
Right, especially for kids.
especially in children.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the research mentioned something called rickets.
Yeah, rickets. What exactly is that?
So rickets is basically when your bones, they become soft and weak,
Yeah.
and it can lead to skeletal deformities,
Like
bowed legs,
Yeah.
classic example.
Yeah. And it can affect adults too, right? Like a vitamin D deficiency can cause similar problems in adults.
All right, so in adults, it's called osteomalacia,
Osteomalacia.
and it's similar in that it makes your bones more fragile,
Okay.
more prone to fractures.
So getting enough vitamin D important throughout our entire lives. What other surprises await us in the realm of vitamin deficiencies?
Well, our next vitamin, vitamin E, is really interesting
Okay.
because a deficiency can actually look a lot like a rare genetic disorder.
Really? That's kind of wild. It's like a case of mistaken identity, but inside the body.
Right, exactly. So vitamin E, it's a powerful antioxidant,
Okay.
and it's, really good at protecting our nerves from damage.
Okay.
But when you're deficient in vitamin E,
Yeah.
it can cause neurological problems
Right.
that are very similar to a condition called Friedreich's ataxia.
Friedreich's ataxia.
Yeah.
And what kind of problems are we talking about here?
So we're talking about things like issues with balance, difficulty with coordination, even walking can become a problem.
Yeah, the research mentioned that.
Yeah.
Problems with walking, balance, coordination. Yeah.
And what's interesting is both a vitamin E deficiency and this genetic disorder,
Right.
they affect the same parts of the nervous system,
Okay.
which is why the symptoms are so similar.
See, that's fascinating. So a lack of a single nutrient can throw these really complex systems totally out of whack. It makes you wonder, like, with some of these rare diseases, maybe the answer is simpler than we think.
It really makes you stop and think, Maybe sometime it really is as simple as making sure you're getting enough of a particular vitamin.
Totally. Okay, so we've covered A, B1, B3, C, D, and E. What else is there? Are we missing any?
Well, we can't forget about vitamin K.
Oh, right. Vitamin K, the blood clotting one.
Exactly. It plays a huge role in blood clotting.
That's the one they give to newborns, right?
Exactly. Because
Oh,
babies, when they're born, they don't have enough vitamin K,
right.
which can lead to bleeding problems.
Right.
And that's why they give them that shot of vitamin K at birth.
Makes sense. It's crazy how all these things are connected, you would never think about it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about deficiencies, but what about the opposite? What happens when we have too much of a good thing?
Ah, that's a great question. And it's true, we're always so focused on getting enough vitamins, but too much of anything can be a bad thing.
Right,
Right.
of course.
And that's where vitamin toxicity comes in.
Yeah, and I would imagine that's less common than a deficiency, but it's still really important to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Toxicities are definitely less common than deficiencies, but they can happen, particularly with a certain type of vitamin, the fat-soluble vitamins.
Oh, right. Fat-soluble vitamins. Can you remind us what makes them different and why they might be a little riskier when it comes to overdoing it?
Of course. So fat-soluble vitamins, those are your A, D, E, and K.
Okay.
And they're different because they're stored in your body fat.
Right.
Unlike water-soluble vitamins, those are flushed out more easily. But because our bodies hold on to those fat-soluble vitamins, if we take too much, they can build up.
Right. It's like the difference between like a leaky bucket versus like
Right.
a sealed container.
Exactly.
One lets things flow through and the other one just keeps accumulating everything.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So yeah, with those fat-soluble vitamins, it's all about being mindful of your intake,
Okay.
not going overboard with the supplements.
Right. Don't want to overdo it. Okay, so let's dive into the world of too much of a good thing, shall we? We've already talked about vitamin A and how it's essential for vision, but what happens when we have too much of it?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that even short-term vitamin A toxicity can cause problems. Imagine like this sudden increase in pressure inside your skull.
Not fun.
Yeah, not a pleasant experience.
Yo, what about long term? If someone's consuming too much vitamin A for a long period of time.
Right, so that's when you get into chronic toxicity.
Okay.
And that can damage your liver.
Yeah.
It can cause joint pain.
Wow. So it's not just those old wives' tales about people turning orange from eating too many carrots.
Well, that can happen too,
right.
but it's usually harmless
Oh.
and temporary. It's called carotenemia. It's just that beta-carotene pigment in the carrots.
Right. Okay. But the more serious effects, definitely something to keep in mind. Okay, what about vitamin D? We talked about how it's super important for bone health, especially those of us who are not out in the sun all the time. But what happens when we have too much?
So with vitamin D, toxicity can lead to something called hypercalcemia.
Hypercalcemia. Break that down for me.
So essentially, it just means too much calcium in your blood.
Okay. And that's a problem because...
Well, I mean, calcium is essential.
Right.
But too much of it, like with most things, it's all about balance.
Yeah.
So when you have too much calcium in your blood, it can cause a whole slew of problems. Nausea, vomiting, constipation, and in really severe cases, it can even disrupt your heart rhythm.
Wow, that sounds really intense.
It can get serious.
So even sunshine in the form of vitamin D has its limits. We got to respect those limits.
Absolutely. More is not always better.
Right. Right. Okay, what about vitamin E? We talked about how a deficiency can mimic that genetic disorder, but what about the flip side? Any surprises when it comes to vitamin E toxicity?
Yeah, there's a surprising one. We always think of vitamin E and we think healthy fats, antioxidants, all that good stuff.
Right.
But it turns out too much of it can actually be harmful, especially for infants.
Really? See, that seems counterintuitive. You would think, oh, vitamin E, that's natural, it's good for you, there's no harm.
Right. But high doses can really mess with a baby's gut health.
Wow, I had no idea. What kind of problems can this cause?
So for infants, those high doses of vitamin E, they can lead to inflammation in the gut. And that can cause digestive issues and potentially more serious problems down the line.
Okay, so that's A, D, and E covered in terms of toxicities. What about K? Any surprises there? Vitamin K toxicity. Not as scary as the others, right?
Not really. It's generally milder.
What kind of symptoms are we talking?
Honestly, in most cases. It's not a huge concern compared to like A, D, or E.
So it really seems like the name of the game with vitamins is balance. Finding that sweet spot, Enough, but not too much.
It's all about balance.
It really makes you realize, even with these essential nutrients, there's a whole other side to them, a complex side.
Absolutely. Vitamins, we need them to live.
Right.
But like with anything else, you can have too much of a good thing.
It's like they each have their own little personalities.
Right.
Vitamin A, good for your eyes, but don't overdo it.
Right.
Vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, crucial for bones.
Yeah.
But too much. Whole different story.
Exactly.
And vitamin E, the antioxidant superstar, but baby's got to be careful with that one.
Got to be careful with the dosage.
It's incredible. Yeah. This deep dive has been so fascinating.
Right.
And we've only just scratched the surface here.
Just a glimpse.
It makes you realize there's so much more to learn about these tiny little compounds that have such a massive impact on our health.
It really does make you think. Given how common some of these deficiencies are, even today, how can we make people more aware?
That's a great question. We've talked about some pretty serious consequences today.
We have.
And I bet a lot of people listening, they probably don't even realize they might have a deficiency. What can we do?
Well, I think education is huge. I mean, really getting the word out about how important a balanced diet is.
Right.
Which foods are packed with which vitamins, things like that.
Yeah, knowing what to look for.
Exactly.
And I guess making testing more accessible so people can actually find out if they have a deficiency, right?
Early detection is key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, what about fortifying more foods with essential vitamins?
That's a great idea.
Especially in places where certain deficiencies are more common.
That's a fantastic solution.
It's all about being proactive.
Right. Finding creative solutions, giving everyone a fair shot at good health.
Well said. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our vitamin adventure. Hopefully, this has got everyone thinking a little differently about those vitamins in their cabinets.
Yeah?
Maybe even sparked some curiosity.
Do your research.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, right?
It really is.
And when you understand how these vitamins work, how they impact your body, that's empowering.
It totally is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
This has been fascinating. We'll see you next time.